Hello, Coach Holmes here, and today we're going to be talking about negation, okay? As far as what it actually represents when it comes to logical statements. Now, negation is pretty simple. Negation is the opposite of the statement. Okay? So it's just basically saying it's just the opposite. That's all it is. So for example, if we say if 2 is odd, the negation of that is 2 is even. Now, of course, 2 is not odd. I'm just giving an example. But that's literally what the negation represents. It's just telling you what the opposite is. And sometimes you may just put a not in there. Like if you are a musician, the negation of that statement is you are not a musician. Okay? So just be aware that sometimes there may be a not, but sometimes if there's actually a direct opposite, you can say the negation of that. Or for example, it is cold outside. The negation of that is it is hot outside. And typically we're going to see that symbol like that. Just a little curl like that. Okay? Given that we see P and Q and stuff like that. Okay? Now, however, we're also going to be introduced to 3 different types of logical statements, along with conditional. We have converse, inverse, and contrapositive. Okay? Now, we know for conditional is if P then Q. We know that because we talked about this last time. If P then Q. Conditional is a if then statement. So typically you'll see the logical statement as Q to P to Q. Typically like that. Now the converse of this is basically when you reverse it. When you reverse the Q and the P. So instead of if P then Q, if Q then P. Which means I'm going from Q to P. Okay? So converse is when it's just switched. The P and the Q are switched. So now your conclusion is now becoming your hypothesis initially. Now the inverse is if, I don't like that. If not P, then not Q, which means the negation of P goes to the negation of Q. Just like that. That's what inverse is. It's just the opposite of P and the opposite of Q. If not P, then not Q. Contrapositive, it's kind of similar to converse. It's kind of similar to converse, except it's the negation of that. So if not Q, then not P. Just like that. If not Q, then not P. So the symbol of this is the negation of Q goes to the negation of P. Okay? So you definitely need to write this down so that way you can be aware of how do we rewrite the statement? How do we rewrite it? And that's what we're going to be talking about right now. There we go. Okay? So, and that's what we're going to be doing right now. We're going to rewrite the statement. Okay? That's our main focus right now. We're just rewriting the statement. So rewrite the statement for each type and determine if it's true. Okay, so we are going to determine if it's true or not. But again, knowing what our truth table is, we can determine whether or not the statement is true. So, the conditional statement. So, the hypothesis is you are a guitar player. And Q is you are a musician. Okay? Now, if hypothesis will be you are a guitar player, then you are a musician. Okay? So let's think about this real quick. Let's say it is true that you are a guitar player. Okay? So if you're a guitar player, you're playing music, and that's what the definition of musician is. Someone who plays music. So if you're playing a guitar, you're playing music, which means you're a musician, which means which means the conclusion is true. So my statement is true. Okay? Now, okay? So now, just to go back for converse, remember it's Q to P. So I'm going to write that down real quick. I'm going to draw a line so that way, I'm just drawing a line so that way I can actually distinguish, so that way y'all can actually distinguish what I'm talking about. Q, if Q, then P. So that means if you are a musician, then you are a guitar player. Well, let's say it's true that you're a musician. Now, musician just makes music. It doesn't matter what instrument they play, just as long as they're making music. Now, we know that there's other different types of instruments. You know, you have the drums, you have the saxophone, what else is there? The trumpet, the clarinet, all these different types of instruments. So it may not necessarily be a guitar player. So we're going to say that's false because as a musician, you're not tied down to one instrument. So if we're going from true to false, the statement is false. Okay? So the converse of that statement is false. Now, I just draw lines to distinguish inverse. So remember, when it comes to inverse, if not P, then not Q. Okay? So the negation of P, negation of Q. If not P, then not Q. Okay? So there's not really an opposite of Q. I mean, there's not really an opposite of the guitar. So we're just going to say if you are not a guitar player, that's the if statement. And really, if you're not a musician, you're just not a musician. Then you are a musician. Okay? I'm sorry, you are not. In case you guys don't know it, if you guys don't remember, the little arrow just puts a replacement for that word. Put it in place. Kind of like in grammar. Okay? So that's just a little arrow pointing to put the word between R and A. You are not a musician. If you're not a guitar player, you are not a musician. Well, let's say you are not a guitar player. Then you are not a musician. Well, so you're saying that I can't play the drums, be a musician? I can't be a trumpet player, be a musician? Well, absolutely you can. So just because you're not a guitar player doesn't mean you're not a musician, because there's other instruments. So this statement is false. So the then will be false. So the statement itself is false. Okay? Next, we're going to do contrapositive, which, remember, if not Q, then not P. So really, we're reversing or flipping the inverse. So if not Q, then not P. Okay? So we know that if you are not a musician, then you are not a guitar player. Okay? So let's say it's true that you are not a musician. Okay? You're not a musician. Can you play the guitar? Well, no, because if you play the guitar, that means you're a musician right there. Okay? If you're not a musician, you can't play any instruments. You can't play the guitar. You can't play the drums. You can't play the clarinet. You can't play the triangle. You can't sing. So if you're not a musician, you can't play the guitar, which makes it true, which means the statement itself is true. Okay? So really, the big focus I want y'all to focus on is to be able to rewrite the conditional statement, the converse, the inverse, and the contrapositive of that statement. That's really what the big focus on. I'm just throwing in a little practice for y'all when it comes to determining if the statement is true or not. Because remember, if it's true if true then true, the statement is true itself. If true then false, the statement is false as well. Okay? Which, by the way, if you guys don't know ASL, this is T and this is F. So I'm saying true or false. Okay? So just be aware of how to rewrite the statement for a converse, inverse, and contrapositive statement. Just be aware of how do you rewrite the statements for those three, as well as conditional statement. Thank you. Have a good day.